Hello, 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 everybody. Gonna wait for it to build up a little bit here. Then we'll get going. Share this out to the socials. Right quick. All right. How's everybody doing? We got Grace Long in the house. Let's go. I'm here to only to hate on the Aggies. Hashtag Roll Tide. Carson in the house. Trevor Gars in the house. You knew Trevor Gars would be in the house. Dontrell in the house, talking a little Arkansas tonight. I was excited to look into Arkansas. I'm a fan of Kendall Briles. See what they can do this year. Can we try to be I'm guessing this, can we try to be kind to Jimbo today? Yeah, of course. I'm always kind. I'm tweeting this out, guys. If you haven't followed me yet, at Tyler Huck on Twitter. Don't worry, Chris will be here. Sounds like he's running late. Who would have thought? Any Bravos fans in the house? We got big series here against the Mets. Feels like we got to take 3 games. All right. Dontrell, 10 wins on Arkansas. Yeah, we're going to be talking a little Miles Brennan. Got some happy birthday Kip in the house. We're up to 15 people. I think we're live in the Facebook group, we're live on YouTube. Go share out the link to your social, please. Pretty cool. Chris and I both ended up going to an event on Friday, Drew Butler's event. And with Jake Fromm up there in Alpharetta at Chris says the link isn't working. All right. There he is. And we met a couple listeners, or I met a couple listeners. I think Chris had probably met most. Go ahead and mute Chris here. I don't know what he's doing. But yeah, we went up to support Drew and Jake and his new. There you are. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. How's this with the new upgraded?
Man, we're looking good in 1080p tonight. We are live.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
But I was just saying how we went to the Punt and Pass podcast on Friday and got to see a bunch of the listeners, which was really cool.
That was cool.
Hopefully some of you guys can make it out to the live event, which we'll talk about once we actually start recording the pod. Wide angle Uncle Chris. All right. All righty. You ready to get going?
Yeah, man.
All right.
It's like actual stuff to talk about this week. I'm pumped.
I know, it's fun. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the College Football Uncensored podcast, brought to you by Saturday Down South. I'm your host, Tyler Huck, and with me, as always, my co-host, a friend of mine that I just like to visit mansions with on the weekends, Chris Marler. Chris.
We had a Friday.
We did. That really turned into a pretty big night, I felt.
There was a corgi. I don't know if you already brought that up. There was a corgi. That was the most important part for me. It was awesome. I had a blast.
Yeah. So now that we're actually recording the pod here, if you haven't yet, you got to come check out the live shows on YouTube. We we chat a little bit before we actually start recording. So come check us out. But we were just discussing that Chris and I went to the Punt and Pass podcast on Friday. They did a live show. If you're not familiar, that's Drew Butler, who we just had on as our guest for the UGA preview. Him and now Jake Fromm have a podcast together. Fromm replaces Aaron Murray on the pod. And Chris and I went up there to go support Drew and go check it out. We met some listeners up there. And then just things evolved. And I found myself out to dinner with Chris's girlfriend's parents, some of her friends. Obviously, Chris and Liz were there as well. It was quite insane. And it took a different turn. So, Chris, you are muted. It says your mic isn't connected. So I'll keep riffing here. But yeah, it was cool. Got to meet Jake as well. Hopefully we'll have Jake on this season to preview or to recap some Georgia games. Jake's a really good dude. I even heard Chris, I think, at one time say he's never washing his right hand again after shaking Jake's hand. Have you washed it?
It's very sticky, but no, I have not.
Oh, that's strange.
A lot of lollipops, weirdo.
So yeah, so we met some cool listeners, the people that tell us that they listen every week, and really appreciated that. So hopefully you guys can make it out to the live event, which is somehow already next Friday.
Yeah, what the fuck? Not great. No, it should be a lot of fun. American Spirit Works Distillery, 7 to 9. Show up at 6:30. I'm pumped, man. Should be a lot of fun. So,
yeah, gonna be a good time. Me, Chris, hopefully producer Dan will be there as well. We met some cool Georgia fans this week, so maybe maybe we'll get some A&M fans or some Arkansas fans out.
Yeah,
after the preview today.
Time for that.
We've got some guests joining us a little bit later to preview Texas A&M and to preview Arkansas. But there is actually news, like you said, Chris. First bit of news always makes me excited was the AP polls dropped today.
So you get excited for that?
Well, I think not necessarily to see the poll, because I've got some interesting stats here about the poll, but it just means that, okay, like this is when I go to watch Georgia, Oregon, it's going to say number 3 Georgia versus number 11 Oregon. And now I know that.
Right.
And it just makes me happy.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. Like people that say it doesn't matter, let me tell you the number one reason why the preseason poll matters. And this may not be a good thing. Auburn fans aren't going to like to hear this, but we were talking about this weekend. Remember the 2004 season where Auburn was left out of the national championship game? And it is one of the most talked about, I don't say like debated or just hotly contested years where the national championship, maybe there should have been a split national title. I don't know. Auburn, I don't know what they started out ranked that year, but I do know that USC and Oklahoma started out 1 versus 2 and never lost. Auburn was never going to get in that game because of that. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm sure a lot of SEC fans probably feel like it's a bad thing with that example, but it's out. It does matter a little bit. But needless to say, there's going to be a lot of some people that are just egregious misses, some people that we're sleeping on, some people too high, some people too low. Who'd you think was too high and too low?
So I'm still kind of baffled that Miami's getting so much love. I mean, like I get that the recruiting is kind of taking off, and Cristobal is kind of getting the juice around the program, but like they still have the same team from last year, which granted they have a good QB. I don't think they're necessarily going to be challenging like Clemson or anything. I think they're probably maybe a year away, but we'll see. There are some people that are very high on them. To me, Notre Dame, I mean, your brand new coaching staff, you got a new QB. I think they had an injury at wide receiver that was pretty massive in camp. So I just don't know how Notre Dame would be better than 5 at the end of the year. So they're probably a little overranked. What about you?
I was a little bit surprised that Oklahoma was 9. Just because of the fact that they lost their head coach, they lost Now they have a first-year head coach. They're in a conference that I think it's probably not better top to bottom necessarily, but a little bit improved from the year before. Your main rival blew a almost 20-plus point lead to you last year. Probably won't happen again, and there's a lot of improvement from them. I mean, and you lost your best quarterback. I understand they had Dylan Gabriel. I just was kind of surprised by that. Let's see.
Gabriel, and remember, Gabriel's been with Lebby at UCF, right, and put up big numbers under him. So, but yeah, no, I agree with you.
Southern Cal at 14 after going 4-8.
How about no Texas? I mean, I get it to an extent.
That was surprising.
But, everybody loves to put Texas in the AP poll. Couple stats here. LSU unranked in the AP Top 25 preseason poll for the first time since 2000, which snaps a 21-year streak. So now the current longest streaks, 34 for Ohio State, 34 straight AP preseason polls, 23 for Oklahoma, 21 Georgia, and 15 Alabama.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, I saw another one. This one isn't as exciting, but it's the first time since 1974 that neither Florida or Florida State were preseason ranked in the top 25.
Kind of like that.
Something you might not like. Obviously, number one, Bama, 54 total votes, almost unanimous. 16 of the last 18 AP preseason number one ranked teams failed to win the national title. It's bad omen.
Yeah, not a huge fan of that, but it makes sense too.
Do you know the two teams that have done it in the last 18?
I think I do, actually. In the last 18, it wasn't Bama 2017.
That is one. I'll give you a hint, just a small hint. It was before that, like much before that.
Was it USC?
Yes, 2004? USC 2004. Correct.
Boom.
The only two teams to overcome the number one jinx and win the title. So I found that pretty interesting. Also, I'm surprised about Clemson being 4. I mean, I get it because they have a ton of talent on that defense and on offense. Really, right. They just need the quarterback to step up. But they have 2 brand new coordinators. The quarterback was not good last year. Number 4 should be interesting.
Wait, what? For who?
For Clemson.
For Clemson, yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason I had NC State in my head, and I was like, that is the opposite of that. Yeah, DJ Uiagalelei was the bar set so low, you would think he would have to be better, but still.
All right, I got a couple questions for you.
Okay.
Every year for the past 20 years, except one, 2019, there's been at least one preseason top 10 team that finished the season unranked. Last year, UNC, Texas A&M, and Iowa State, all.
Right.
Which team out of this top 10 this year could you see being unranked at the end of the year?
Out of this top 10?
Yeah. Statistically, it will happen this year.
I would say something like, the easy choice here would be like Baylor if they lose to Texas and Oklahoma. Utah, because they're already at 7. And if they end up losing to USC, I don't think Clemson has enough, man.
You think it'll be unranked, though? Okay, yeah.
Oh, unranked completely or out of the top 10?
No, top 10. So that the stat was every year for the past 20 years, at least one team out of the top 10 has been unranked at the end of the year.
That's crazy. It will definitely not fucking be Notre Dame. I guess I don't know enough about Baylor, but I'd have to say OU or Baylor.
Yeah, I could also see. I don't know. Some people really like Michigan, but I could see Michigan. I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't know what I'd love to.
RJ Young didn't have them in their his top 25.
All right, here's another one. Since 2004, every national championship or every national champion was ranked among the AP preseason polls top 7. Except for 2 teams. So
Auburn in 2010.
Yep.
Fucking hate you. In the preseason?
Preseason. So only 2 teams have won starting outside of the top 7 since 2004. Auburn 2010 is 1. Think
I feel like
about it.
LSU is 6th.
I'm just going to go back here.
It wouldn't have been Clemson. It wouldn't have been Bama. Wait, it would have been Clemson 2016?
I don't know who this is, Facebook user, but they are correct. Florida State 2013.
Oh, wow.
Started number 11 that year.
Okay.
So if you're trying to predict a national championship, since 2004, if things hold pretty true to form,
right,
Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame, A&M, or Utah is going to win the national championship this year.
Yeah. I mean, well, and honestly, it'd be 2 through 7 because of the way the stats have kind of shaken out with
Right.
the number 1 overall ranking.
So sometimes you'd say, hey, there's nothing to take from these numbers. There's just a preseason number, but there are some statistics that are pretty strong that have to do with the preseason poll. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I know people wanted to get into Miles Brennan stepping away from football. We could touch on that. I mean, we just previewed LSU. Our guests both said that it pretty much seemed like Brennan was probably running 3rd. So not
that's what we heard last
unexpected.
week.
So I don't think it's a huge deal as far as LSU on the field this year, unless something disastrous happens with their top 2 QBs as far as injuries are concerned. But, you know, got to give a hat tip to Miles Brennan. He was going into his 6th year of college football. Just could never really kind of break in. I mean, he was supposed to be pretty good, and injuries just started to pile up, and he's going to take it on down the road.
Yeah. I mean, like, I honestly, until last week, I was very surprised that he was not going to be the starter just because of like the experience factor and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I was way off.
Yeah. So it looks like Jaden Daniels is going to be the guy. So they probably need to beef him up a little bit. He seems quite skinny to be playing quarterback in the SEC. So we'll see.
Well, but what we heard last week, they were saying that it actually might be Nussmeier if he wasn't banged up.
Yeah, there is still, a couple weeks to go. Obviously, huge opener, and I almost said home opener, but that'd be a Freudian slip because it pretty much is a home game against Florida State in New Orleans. So should be interesting to see how that QB battle shakes out. A couple QB battles in the SEC West outside of that are starting to shape up. News out of Auburn, like Harson's being kind of coy on this, but it sounds like TJ Finley. I listened to Josh Pate's show earlier today, and he was talking about how he was hearing Finley may be the guy, which would shock me.
I mean, Finley has the measurables for sure. I don't think there's a player or quarterback in the SEC with a better arm than Calzada. I don't think that makes up for everything. But I mean, if you think about it, like, again, he was not great last year.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think this is – so I think a lot of people just assume Calzada would be the guy just because of the fit in Harson's offense. But do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? Is this good news or bad news if you're an Auburn fan and you're hearing that TJ Finley might be the guy? Because you can look at it one of two ways. Without knowing what's going on in camp, either Finley actually looks really good, which we've seen the product on the field, it's been up and down, or it's just Calzada's really not working out.
Well, and the third string guy is Robbie Ashford, the freshman. He's looked good at times, but I don't think he's gonna. I don't think Harson's gonna put this season in the hands of a freshman, unless it was like a generational type kid. I don't think it's like great or or horrific or like the way to describe it. Like, I don't think it's like this is great news or this is horrible news. I think it's just news because. One, Harsin is not going to jeopardize that position, especially after how everything was handled at the end of last season. The other part of it is that it's not like Calzada was some world beater, right? I mean, TJ Finley, we saw him pretty banged up last year, but I think he's also the guy that kind of came back and won you the Georgia State game, which I don't know how much street credit that gives you. But I will say he just got arrested last week.
Is that Calzada did? Or Finley? Oh, yeah, Finley. No. Sorry, I was like, Jesus Christ.
This is all a part of the blueprint for Auburn to win a title.
Right.
You get a quarterback that's arrested. Now, listen, if he would have been kicked out of another school, yeah. I mean, that's why I brought this up last week. Everyone thought I was joking, but Ajay Hall, receiver from Texas, quarterback at Auburn. Hear me out there. Probably not.
He was at another school. He just didn't get kicked out.
Not yet.
Or so we think.
Trying to get rid of that boot on his car. No, I mean, I don't think it's anything that's like great news, bad news, anything like that. I think it's the first scrimmage. I think we just all kind of expected Calzada to start, but for what? Right? Like, for what reason?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just like any, why would he have transferred to Auburn if he wasn't pretty much knowing that he was going to be the starter? That's the only thing, really.
Well, because he wasn't going to play at A&M.
I mean, by the way, there's some juicy rumors going on there as far as their recruiting quarterback.
For who?
You saw who visited them, right? Unofficially,
No.
The number one QB in the country, committed to USC.
Oh, Malachi, what's his name?
Yeah, Malachi Nelson. I'm just going to watch that closely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so TJ Finley and then obviously Jackson Dart seems like he's kind of, which I think that's more was the assumption that he would have the job at Ole Miss. But it sounds like after, this first little bit here of camp, he's got the leg up. Want to go over to Texas? A lot going on at Texas right now.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
So there's a couple things on their docket. None of them seem good, in my opinion. So you've got the two major losses that they had with knee injuries in this last scrimmage. You had Isaiah Nayor, who was the transfer wide receiver from Wyoming. He was going to be a big part of what they did. He was really good at Wyoming. He tore his ACL. Unfortunately, he'll be out for the year. Angelo, who is Junior Angelo, who's their most experienced O-line, started all 12 games last year, 6 at left guard, 6 at right guard.
Right.
He tears his ACL. So your best and most experienced O-lineman gone now for the year. A true freshman backed him up, so we'll see what happens there. You got Ajay Hall suspended indefinitely for being arrested. Continuing a bit of a troubling trend for him when it comes to things that don't even involve football at all. They had their second leading rusher from last year. He got banged up in the scrimmage as well.
Good
Not expected to be long term.
Right.
And then the most surprising thing out of all this, Hudson Card running first team over Quinn Ewers.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. So
I guess we haven't locked in those Texas to the
to the playoff.
Good thing we didn't preview Texas. I think so. If you guys saw this on social media this weekend, did you see the meme that somebody made of like the all gas no brakes thing, but with the boot on it on the car?
Mm-mm.
So like Texas came out with like a recruiting graphic, and it's like a burnt orange Lamborghini in front of the stadium. It's like all gas, no brakes. Somebody did some Photoshop to it and put a like parking tickets on the dash and then a boot on the front wheel.
Right.
And it was Robert Bairds, the guy who we're going to interview later for A&M.
Nice.
So I'm pretty fired up about that. But yeah, man. So that's pretty crazy. Also, Florida had another good weekend in recruiting, which was pretty big for them.
Yes.
I heard rumors. I don't know how true it is, but that Eli Ricks is not playing with the ones yet at Bama. Should be kind of surprising.
That's interesting. I wonder, a year off for him at LSU, mainly because he just didn't seem like he really wanted to be playing for LSU. You wonder where his head's at if he's not running the ones.
Right.
Interesting.
So
a lot of storylines popping up this week. That means that we're getting close.
Yeah, thank God.
Did you see Clemson's DN Xavier Thomas, former 5-star, number 1 pass rusher, carted off the field? He's out at least 6 weeks for Clemson.
I did not see that. Isn't that the same? He's been there since the 2018 national title game.
Yeah, he's been there, it seems like forever. I thought he'd be Jesus Christ. 3 and out, but
yeah,
I do want to give a shout out to Florida. I mean, look, I'm a Florida State guy, but obviously a couple months ago, people were freaking out about Billy Napier's ability to recruit, which, I played into it a little bit for fun because why not? But come on, the guy had barely been there for a couple months. And And now it seems like they're really starting to step up their game on the recruiting trail.
Yeah.
Over the week, like last year, they were 51 in total defense. They couldn't stop the run all year. They were 85th in stopping the run. What do they do this week? You got the Kelby Collins, who chose Florida over Alabama and Georgia. Cameron James on the D line. He chooses Florida over Georgia, as well as many other teams, including Alabama. You had another D lineman, top 100 guy as well, Will Norman, commits to Florida over LSU and A&M. Then they get the number 2 linebacker in the 2024 class to go along with some guys that they'd already kind of started to stack up leading into this week. Florida is turning up the pressure a little bit on the recruiting trail.
You know what I'm excited for, besides all of that, is the actual season. So we don't have to talk about recruiting anymore. That's going to be the fucking best. I heard some juicy info on Justice Hayes, by the way.
The running back recruit?
Or Haynes, the kid that went to Bama over to Georgia. If you're a Georgia fan, maybe you lucked out. Maybe that's not a guy you necessarily want long term.
Oh.
From what I was told from some people close to that situation.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, well, we won't delve into that, but that'll just be something to watch as well. So we're doing Arkansas first, correct?
Right. We're waiting on Ty Richardson from ESPN Arkansas. Hit that line. Dude he actually used to work for us. I've known him for years. Fantastic guy. I mean, the link has been sent, so we're just waiting on him to click it. Okay. But he previewed Arkansas last year with us as well. So
yeah,
why don't you and I get into it a little bit and go through some of like just the ins and outs of like the record. Obviously, last year they were 9-3 or 9-4. They returned a decent amount of starters on offense, especially. They are one of, I forgot how many teams, but very few in the country that returned their offensive and defensive coordinator for the 3rd consecutive season, which is great. KJ Jefferson obviously is a big name that returns. You lose a couple big names. You lose one big name especially, right? Your best receiver, the best receiver you've had in a minute, Traylon Burks. But you go to the portal, you get 2 former 5-stars with Hazelwood and also Drew Sanders. I think Drew Sanders is going to be really good and be an instant impact, that outside linebacker, not just because he played at Bama, but because the fact that it wasn't like he got beat out at Bama because he wasn't any good. He got beat out by Dallas Turner, who might be one of the best players in the country. Anyway, so I think there's a lot to look forward to this season for Arkansas. A lot of optimism. Some people have them. Where were they ranked again? I've seen some people have them like top 10 in their preseason poll. I think it's a little bit strong. But Pittman's done a really good job. He's 16-6 against the spread, like we pointed out before.
Ty is in the building as well. All right, let's get this going.
Great lighting.
There he is, man of the hour.
You're adorable.
Does that look okay? I know you don't have much.
No, you look like shit, but it's fine.
Look at that hair.
I got out of the shower. Oh.
Man. All righty.
So we got like 15 minutes to break down Arkansas. We appreciate you joining us, man. It's been a minute. You've been traveling all over the place. Been kind of like an outdoor cat, just going from place to place and all over.
A gypsy.
This is fucking frozen. What's that?
A gypsy, Marler.
That's right.
All right, Arkansas. Good to see you again, by the way. Glad to have you back on this year for another preview. You were fired up on Arkansas last preseason. I remember taking the over just based solely on how fired up you were. So I appreciate that on the win totals. This year we were just talking about before you came on, both coordinators back. I'm a huge fan of Kendall Briles. So I heard a crazy stat today that it's the first time as an offensive coordinator and QB coach that he's had a returning QB in his he hasn't had a long career, but in his career. So a lot to be excited about on offense. KJ Jefferson obviously back, turned into a really good QB. I don't think people saw that coming, except for you. I don't think he's the perfect quarterback, but Bryles' system, spreading out the receivers super wide, opening up the middle of that defense to be able to run and get receivers one-on-one is like perfect for KJ Jefferson. So how has he looked in camp here?
KJ's better than he was last year, I think. And I know a lot of people are concerned about the departure of Traylon Burks guys, but I think that he's going to show people once again that undervalued. He's seeing lists where he's not even included the top 5 of SEC quarterbacks. And honestly, that's probably pissing him off. I don't know how cocky of a young man he is. He comes across as confident, and I think there's a big difference. But, yeah, the Bryles thing, Huck, that you just brought up, I remember hearing that in the offseason and just kind of like stopping. Like, there's no way that's right. So we've got a chance to talk with Seth Russell and some other quarterbacks that he's had at Baylor, and then Frank's obviously at Arkansas, now KJ. I don't think you can undervalue that because he is one of the better offensive minds in the game. And so, yeah, this season from an Arkansas standpoint offensively, this is going to be the best offense that Kendall Bryles has had at his disposal to this point.
How long do you think he's going to be there? I'm getting feedback from one of you guys. I can hear myself. But anyways, how long do you think he'll be there? Because obviously, I think a lot of it has to do with his last name.
Hold up. What is happening? Why is there an echo?
Yeah. All right. People in the chat hear the echo too. Might be you, Ty. Try muting real fast. All right. It is you. Okay. So Bryles. Yeah, it's definitely stay on mute and then okay, cool. So Bryles, I think at least at this point, a G5 school you'd think would have picked him up as head coach. I think he's got an excellent coaching acumen. How long do you think he's going to be there? I know there's like a little bit of a thing with his last name and what his dad did at Baylor and all that, but is this the last year for Bryles, or do you think he'll be around for a while?
I think Odom's probably more likely to get that head coaching job next. I think the job to watch is what happens in Memphis. If Barry Odom ever had a head coaching opportunity, I think that might be a destination where he could wind up. Bryles, kind of like you said, and I've heard so many different things. I guess I need to go through the documents and read the other stuff because I don't know how much like he was implicated compared to his dad, or like I don't have enough knowledge to touch deeply on it from that, and for athletic directors and chancellors and board of directors and all that stuff to look into that and make a decision whether he should be the head football coach or whatever, because I just don't know enough about it. But From a coaching acumen and standpoint, I mean, you're going to see it this year. All I heard about KJ Jefferson in the offseason was this guy can't throw. They're not going to be able to do anything. Felipe Franks broke the single season completion percentage record, and then KJ almost came back and beat it the following year. So I think that his numbers have spoke for themselves. You're the number one rushing attack in the Power 5 in the Southeastern Conference and in the West, not in the East. So he's got a lot in his pedigree right now, and it just matters the right fit, right? You just happen to luck into this right fit with Chris Marler, right, Huck? And
yeah.
Marler could say the same thing about you, but sometimes
I would not. Yeah.
You probably have a better opportunity out there at some point for yourself, and definitely take it. Leave Marler in the dust, but it just depends on. There's always the grass always greener approach, and some guys just like being assistant coaches. Bud Foster, how long was Bud Foster at VTech? Like 40 years? I swear that guy was as old as Beamer. Some guys just like being assistant coaches. I don't know what his kind of thought process is long term, but if they keep winning, he's got a good situation. Fayetteville's a cool place, man. Why leave?
All right, I like that. Obviously, the O-line is going to be good anytime Pittman's the coach. So not too concerned there, I'm sure. I have major questions about the wide receiver room. And we talked about we did a podcast a couple weeks ago about our biggest questions around the SEC. Obviously, you have some major losses there. You bring in Jaden Hazelwood, who at one point was the number one receiver as a recruit. I think he had maybe an up and down spring. I don't know if he was. I can't remember hearing much about him. Who steps in at wide receiver? How has Hazelwood look? Tell us a little bit about the receiver room.
Hazelwood had a shoulder ding up, so that's why he wasn't and maybe he didn't hurt. And spring ball, it's like, wow, you did something in spring ball, and then sometimes a guy does something in spring ball, doesn't do anything postseason or regular season. Then you hear about a guy that didn't do anything in spring ball. He explodes for 700 yards. So I don't know how much to take into the fact. I just know what I've heard from the wide receivers lately is they're kind of sick and tired of hearing about Burks. They loved him. The guys that were there last year that are still here loved him as a teammate. He was that alpha. When they had a 3rd and 6, you knew who was getting the first down. But Traylon's a Tennessee Titan now. He's not on this team anymore. And I think that you've heard from several of the guys, it's like, hey, we're not scrubs. They had a bunch of Jade Hazelwood was the number 1 recruit from a wide receiver standpoint in the class of either 2018 or 2019. Keetraw Jackson was a 4-star out of Royce City, Texas. Warren Thompson was a 4-star wide receiver. They've got some guys that are, I think most of the average height of the wide receiver room is like 6'3". That Matt Laner's kid, 6'5", and can absolutely apparently fly. They got a kid, number 1 recruit out of Arkansas, Isaiah Satania. He ran like incredible track numbers. He's going to be on the track team in the fall. So they've got some guys. It's kind of like a good old juicy pot roast that you got in the oven. You can't 100% feel if it's going to turn out right and it's going to be that perfect amount of moisture and not too mushy and not too hard. But that thing caramelizes and you cook it the right amount, which Kendall Briles knows how to cook things when it comes to that football team and football in general. And that sucker's going to taste good in the fall. And I think Arkansas is going to have a better wide receiver core than people were initially giving them credit for.
All right, so looking through some of the schedule, man, like I want Arkansas to be good. I want you to be happy most of the time. I want Pittman to be happy all the time. It's been so much fun to watch, and like how quickly he's been able to turn that around from the Chad Morris era and how awful that was. But the whole idea that 8-9 wins is a gimme now, right? It's a guarantee because of what happened in year 2 and how quickly he's been able to turn everything around. I said this to you a while back. They've had 5 seasons in the last 10 years where they've had 8 or more losses, and they've only had 2 seasons where they've had 8 or more wins. I think that he's turned a corner. Obviously, he's recruiting well. But looking at the schedule, what scares you most? What game do you think is a must-win and can kind of be like a catalyst to maybe, get the ball rolling, kind of like last year, that A&M win? Or is there a game that you have circled that could be the wheels could fall?
I think the bye and the Auburn game following that bye is the biggest thing. They've got to regroup. They've got to replenish. You've got Auburn, 3 straight home games, and you close out Missouri. That back half of the schedule, it's not easy, but it's easier than the front half when you have Ole Miss, LSU, and Missouri all in the month of November in addition to Liberty. Again, by no means am I chalking up 4 wins, but if you can start out that 5-game stretch with a win on the road against Auburn, a place they have not won since 2012, and then you got 3 straight games at home, and then a game in Missouri, which I think Missouri is going to be horrible this year. That's, to me, the setup for how you finish strong with this football team. There's so many games with the non-conference games, including BYU. You can make a case that the swing game is a non-conference game, but you probably can't do that on any other SEC schedule outside of Arkansas just because of how tough those games actually are. But when you say schedule, and you say that's I think that's a fair argument. But every SEC team has a tough schedule. I mean, they are brutal this year when you look across the board. Alabama, as much as they're going to be extremely good this year, and you got the A on right now, got to go to Oxford, Knoxville, Fayetteville, got to play the A&M game, which I think they're going to run over A&M, see what happens in Austin. I think that every SEC team has a tough schedule, and Arkansas is just a part of that group. It might be a little bit harder with Cincy and BYU. Man, the SEC is just not easy, especially the West. It ain't easy right now, boys.
Yeah, no, you're right. On defense, I'm a little worried for Arkansas. You know, Odom, he runs a 3-2-6. You look at the D-line, the top three in terms of snap count are gone. They did add some quality transfers. You lose 4 of your top 5 tacklers. Your top 2 in snap count at linebacker, I believe, are gone. Is the defense, how bad does it drop off this year, in your opinion?
I think that the addition of Drew Sanders, if they had not added the pieces that they did out of the portal, we're having a completely different conversation on this defense. But I think about adding Jordan Dominique out of Georgia Tech, Terry Hampton, who El Dorado, Arkansas, Southern Arkansas kid that Arkansas State, and now comes to Arkansas. We've talked about the offensive players, Landon Jackson, Dwight Nudie McLaughlin. I mean, they added a bunch of pieces. Latavius Brini, however you say his name. You're going to see all those guys play significant minutes, if not start, I think, at some point. That's how vital it is, because we saw it last year with Trey Williams, Markel Utzi, and John Ridgway. All 3 of those transfers they got in played significant minutes. In fact, they all started. I don't know if they're going to be that major of a drop-off. Now, it's difficult to kind of stomach that when you lose Grant Morgan, Hayden Henry. I know you lost Greg Brooks and Joe Fouché at LSU. But you got Catalon back. Catalon was injured. I think it was the A&M game. And then after, I think, the Ole Miss game, he was done. He's your All-American safety, and he's back. Now, that's not to say he's going to get injured, or not get injured, excuse me. But the fact that he's back, and you saw Bumper Pool, who right now ranks 2nd in all of college football in the returning players with tackles, I don't see it taking that big of a drop-off. Now, it might not be a top 3 defense in the SEC, but I don't see them going from kind of middle of the pack to like 12th or 11th. I think it's going to be more mid-tier than it is kind of back of the group.
All right. So last year you won 9. This year the win total is 7.5. Got Phil Steele's number 4 hardest schedule in the country for 2022. The schedule is daunting. Obviously, you got Cincinnati to open. It's at home. Pittman's 5-0 versus the non-con. Missouri State got Bobby Petrino coming back in the house. That's a pretty interesting line. Obviously, it's not going to be a game. You've got Bama at home. You go on the road to Auburn, Mississippi State, and Missouri, and BYU. First time ever going playing BYU. What are you doing with the over of 7 or over under 7.5?
I'm going over. I've got them very on the kind of moderate side. I've got them at 8 wins. I hope I'm dead wrong. I hope I've never been more wrong in my entire life and they get 9 or 10. I could see them having that Ole Miss type of last year where they get that 2nd place in the West and are still thoroughly behind Alabama, because I think Ole Miss with 2 losses was behind them 2 games. They lost to Alabama. I can't remember who else Ole Miss lost to, but that's where I could see Arkansas going. I can't see them losing more than 5 regular season games. I think the lowest threshold for them is 5. I mean, that would, in an apocalyptic scenario, KJ gets hurt. They have another decimating injury. But the depth's always going to be a concern for Arkansas. You're never going to have the Alabama, Georgia, LSU depth. But you stack up their 1s and 2s in this league, outside of Georgia and Alabama, maybe A&M, but I don't think there's a lot of drop-off when you look at what Arkansas has at their 1s and 2s compared to really every other team in the SEC outside of maybe Georgia and Alabama guys.
Oh, I just removed you on accident. My bad. All right, cool. Yeah, well, I was leaning over as well. I think I got trusting what Kendall Browse do. Obviously, outside of catastrophic injury, which I feel like for most teams, that's how it is. I got confidence in the 7.5. Chris, what about you?
Under. I hate it. I was actually going to go over, but then your audio was such shit tonight. I'm going to have him go winless. Only because I love you and I'm going to give you a hard time. No, I just think that schedule's too difficult, man. It's just too much to do.
Yeah, that's fair. And I apologize about the audio. I have begged my tenant, or I guess I'm a tenant. What is he? The
landlord?
The landlord to upgrade our internet. I live with two of my friends, and he just hadn't got around to it. So that's I'll blame that one on Seabass. That's his fault.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on. Where can the listeners find you on social media?
At Thai Sports Radio. We do a morning show every weekday from 6 to 9 a.m. Central Time. And Marler's coming on Trust in the Process. I'm going to put you through a freaking cheese grater on Thursday. You're so screwed, man. Probably couldn't hear what I said because my audio was...
Yeah. You mean like within my own iPod or AirPods? Is that what you mean by that? Or...
All right, Ty, we appreciate you coming out. We'll see you soon. Good luck this season. All righty. Well, that was.
I love that dude. He's the best. We had him on last year, man. He was so fired up for that Texas game. I wonder. I don't know. I mean, like I hope that I'm wrong, but you never know. You never know.
Yeah, that audio was a little tough.
That was pretty bad.
Tough.
Yeah,
that was tough on everybody. Yeah, I like, the more I read about Bryles and just the actually having returning production at quarterback. Cincinnati loses so much. You put so much into that team last year. They make the playoff. I just don't know. Like, yeah, it could be a tough game, but I think at home, Pittman 5-0 versus non-conference. You get to BYU, but even still, I think you've progressed as a program where you should win that. Although the last 3 times the Razorbacks have gone out west, they've lost. So that's something to watch.
I didn't know that.
Okay, so anything else on Arkansas? Do we have our next guest about to come in here?
So I sent him the invite, but he has not joined yet.
Okay. Yeah, man, I'm excited to see KJ Jefferson play. I don't really view him as a he could be a really good college QB. I don't really view him as a big time NFL prospect. Do you?
No, not at all. There's been some people that have compared him to Cam Newton, which I think is a little bit egregious and stupid. Stupid mainly. I think he's good. I just that's a lot of. I mean, he balled out against Ole Miss, which maybe that happens again because it's Ole Miss and that defense. I don't know if he puts up the same numbers he did against Bama. I mean, there's games. I brought this up before. He was awful against Georgia, but everybody was awful against Georgia. But you look at the A&M game, right? He was 8 of 15 for 220 yards. 185 of that was to Traylon Burks on 2 long plays.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, I hope I'm wrong. I just think that schedule is just gonna be so damn difficult. I will say up next we have A&M, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, they're a team that's trending up. Obviously, now wouldn't say that record wise. They were still 8-4 last year.
Very good point. Yeah.
But they are trending up in terms of recruiting, and they did beat Bama last year. So that's a feather in the cap there. You wouldn't, I wasn't sure if that would happen.
Yeah.
They're starting to stack pretty talented classes on top of each other. I think for them, if you look at their and Robert's here in the green room waiting for us. They're all their best talent is underclassmen, whether it's true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomore. So I don't know if this is the year, but let's bring in our guest. We got Robert Behrens, the creator of the magical meme.
Evening, guys. How you doing?
Good, man.
Great, man.
Welcome back. First off, you were on here last year, and it's one of my favorite interviews we did because not only because of your prediction of 12-0, mainly, I know. It's fine. You first off, we bought into it immediately too. We were we all agreed.
Fired up.
I was so convinced.
But no, I didn't realize until it might have been halfway through. It might have been 3 days after how good of a person you are, and so all of the language just flying out of our mouths, mainly mine. I was like, oh. But no, you become one of my favorite follows on social media, and that's saying a lot because the offseason Bama and A&M have had. Big offseason for A&M. Just right off the bat, give us I would say unbiased, but give us your opinion on the state of the program where it's at right now.
I mean, I think it's certainly, as much as everyone likes to throw out the stat of then, I think at this point in their tenure, that Jimbo has the same record as Kevin Sumlin did through that X number. But if you look at just where the program is and the trajectory of the program, like the two could not be more different.
Right.
Because you had someone, started off with like Johnny Manziel winning the Heisman, and just like lightning in a bottle, and then kind of it just got worse and worse every single year. Whereas with Jimbo, you guys were just talking about, it's like that talent that's coming in those recruiting classes, and like you feel like you're building towards something instead of just having something great and then it tapering down. And so, but I mean, just like everybody this time of year, I think people are just ready for the season to get started because we've all talked as much as we can talk. We've all said as much as we can say, and it's time to go prove it on the field. Because I think as an A&M fan, I think we're all very optimistic about what the season could do. I think, and optimistic about, the years to come as well. But for A&M fans, certainly you hope that this is the year where it's like, maybe you are going to see a double-digit win season. Maybe you are going to see, if they don't win the West, at least maybe you get to November and it's still realistic, you're still in the hunt. And so I think that's what A&M is looking for, is just not another 8-4 season and kind of taking that next step to where maybe they're not winning titles, but you see that progress happening to where you can buy into that's where the program is headed.
We'll start on offense. Jimbo, I think over the past few years, it's been kind of cliche for people to complain about how his offense is slow paced. They don't, try for the explosive plays. They're more kind of stuck in the past. And that's been criticized. And Jimbo goes out and he lands 2 5-star freshman receivers, Evan Stewart and Chris Marshall. I know as a Florida State fan how hard it was for true freshman receivers to get on the field in Jimbo's offense because it's a very tough route tree to learn. But it sounds like at least Evan Stewart, if not both those kids, may see pretty extended playing time this year. So who are going to be the playmakers on offense this year?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on Evan Stewart, and he is one of those guys that, there are 5-star guys that, like you said, come in and just don't see the field year one. And Damon Demas was a guy that, through 2 years saw the field. And a lot of other issues with him we're not going to get into. But I mean, Evan Stewart, just as far as the way they talk about him, reminds me a lot of Christian Kirk when he came to A&M back in 2014, where it was a guy that as soon as he stepped on the field, he was the best receiver on the field. And the guy, and not just athleticism, but just is a true receiver that knows how to run a route and knows, and has good hands and kind of is that whole package. So, I mean, I hate to boast, and I prop the guy up too much when
don't.
A true freshman that hasn't even played a game yet. But I mean, but all the reports have been glowing and people have nothing but great things to say about him. So you do hope that that's a guy who can come in right away and kind of be that game-changing talent at receiver that A&M really hasn't had under Jimbo. And you talked about Chris Marshall as the other 5-star, who I think he's a little bit more of a longer-term development guy. Super talented, but I think he's only been playing football for like 3 years. So very much still a lot of learning to do as far as learning the position goes. But we've even heard a lot about Noah Thomas, who was a 4-star receiver in A&M's class. I think like barely ranked in the top 300 in the country, but he's a guy who's like 6'5", and they say still moves really well, and he's been running with like the 1s and 2s in practice. So,
what's interesting is that one of the only true freshmen I remember playing under Jimbo at Florida State was Rashad Green, who I believe is on Jimbo's staff now. Is he not, or was that? Is he still? He was like, he obviously wasn't on field, but he was like a GA type. I don't know if he still is or not. Maybe people in the comments know. I know Sean McGuire, former Florida State quarterback, was on as like a GA as well. But I wonder if maybe Rashad Green is in that receiver room helping those guys, learn the playbook because, historically it's just been very tough for true freshmen to get on the field. But it sounds like Evan Stewart's going to make a big difference. Max Johnson, I'm assuming he's the guy this year.
We don't know, man. I definitely headed into the fall. I think that was the assumption, was that he had the edge, because certainly in the spring game, if you're going off that, he seemed to have the much better performance. But through fall camp, I mean, we're hearing a lot of the things we heard about Haynes King that we did last year, that he's kind of taking that edge. Now it's like, who knows, who knows how much of that is true? Who knows when Jimmo plans on making that announcement? I think last year he made that announcement about 10 days out from the game. So, we're certainly coming into that window. But I think just at the quarterback position overall, you just feel so much better as an A&M fan, because last year I was on here talking about how it was between Haynes King and Zach Calzada. We all thought it was probably going to be Haynes King. And of course, when Haynes King went down less than 5 quarters into the season, we saw what Zach Calzada could do, which outside of the miracle performance against Alabama, the kid was tough as nails. He gave everything he had, but, just he limited what you could do offensively. I think there's no way around that. And so for A&M, just having, I think, 3 good options between Max Johnson, the LSU transfer, Haynes King, and then true freshman Connor Wigman, who's, a 5-star recruit himself. Just by sheer probabilities, I think you hope that whoever is the winner out of that group is going to be a guy who's going to play pretty well. Because, and the way this roster is built, like, you don't need a Heisman level quarterback to win a lot of games. As long as you're getting just above average quarterback play, I think A&M could be in almost every game they play this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's scary, but it's a good point. I want to shift away from anything involving Zach Calzada ever. So my question is this. The defense was really, really good, consistently been really good over the past couple of years. I feel like A&M is one of those schools that we love to give a hard time because of, the 8-4 stuff. But like before 2020, remember, like the whole narrative was, well, they're always in the top 10. They never produce, or they never are able to like reach the mountaintop or whatever. And then you look at their season, like especially in 2019 when they played 5 top 10 teams, I think 4 in the top 5. Like, that's outrageous. One big reason for their success, especially in 2020 and last year, was Elko. And the DC is gone. He was there for 4 years. Now he's the head coach at Duke. You have DJ Durkin, who is just beloved by all fans outside of College Station, which we're not going to get into. But how is the defense going to look this year? Because you do have a lot of experience in the back end, like secondary should be really good, but a lot of the front 4, especially, maybe, like, they should be super talented, just very young. What do you expect from the defense?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on all kind of the question marks. Would be the fact that, like you said, replacing Mike Elko, who had been here for all 4 of Jimbo's years in College Station. So while from everything we've heard, I think the scheme is probably going to be relatively unchanged. Like, they're still going to run a 4-2-5. One of the best things that Elko had was like halftime adjustments, and that was something as an M fan, you would see things that weren't working in the first half, but you always had that confidence at halftime they were going to come in, they were going to figure something out, and they were going to lock it down, and more often than not, they did. So I mean, coordinator, it's like I have no idea. I'm when it comes to X's and O's, I'm an idiot, so I have no idea what to expect. You kind of hope that they made the right hire, and that thing can just keep on rolling. Because, I mean, the secondary should be, I think, one of the top units in the country. They lose Leon O'Neal, but other than that, they bring everybody back, plus bring in, just once again, a couple 5-stars, some other high 4-star DBs, just provide depth. And that's, I think one thing across the board that 2022 class provides is it's not just those, handful of guys that are going to jump into the starting lineup. It's getting that depth to where when X player goes down, you don't have like a scrub 3-star having to be thrown into the lineup.
Right.
Going to the defensive line, I think, it's a hard question to answer because you are right. They lost all 4 of their starters from last year.
Right.
So from that perspective, you could say, oh, that unit's going to take a step back. But at the same time, that's the position where they have recruited the best, not just in 2022, but in the years prior to that. So they're looking at, based on what the depth chart looks like at the moment as far as practice reports, none of those freshmen are in the starting 4. Now, they're all still probably going to be in the rotation, but that starting 4 is all sophomores, juniors. and all guys that while they weren't starters, have seen plenty of game experience. So,
well, I hate that.
I mean that's McKinley Jackson, Shamar Turner, Tunmisi Adelaide, I think Fadil Diggs, and Isaiah Rakes. I mean, it's all like pretty much almost all top 100 guys, which that's the beauty of like.
We should not have had him on. I knew this.
Has over recruited that position, like which. You can try to like question that as from a roster construction standpoint, but man, if there's a position over recruit, it's defensive line, because you can just you can just send in like wave after wave of blue chip talent. That's how you win games.
Look at Georgia last year. Yeah, that's a good point.
Second half covers might be a thing in the future for Texas A&M as they wear down.
We're going to be the pioneers of the 8-1-2 defense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you got. I mean, there's some freaks on there. Walter Nolan, just an absolute monster.
Yeah.
Linebacker, I read there's experience, but not a ton of depth as far as linebacker.
Yeah. If there is one spot where I think where A&M's susceptible to injury on defense, it's definitely linebacker. You're looking at Edgerrin Cooper and Andre White as the two starters, and then beyond those guys, I mean, kind of like you said, you have like some upperclassmen behind them that could step in and play if need be. But it's not just the top end talent that you see a lot of the other positions. And that's a big part of, why I think that's a priority position for A&M in 2023 recruiting. I think they've already got 3 linebackers. Are probably looking to add maybe another one, but that definitely is the position where it's like that you look at the most, where it's like, if one guy goes down, it starts getting iffy.
Do you think they'll probably spend more money on those players at linebacker this year than I'm playing with you, Robert. I'm playing.
Yes. Hey, my wife maintains the budget. You'll have to ask her.
That money is being saved for one Malachi Nelson, I believe.
Yeah. That's the juicy rumor at the moment.
Yep.
So I have a follow-up question here on just a position of not necessarily need, but kind of surprised like how thin it kind of becomes. You had Weidermeyer last year, right, at tight end, who was one of the best tight ends in the SEC, has a terrible, I don't know who gave him like the advice or who's in his ear telling him to go pro, probably not the best decision, has a pretty bad combine. But then losing Baylor, was it Baylor Cup?
Yep.
Yeah, so and that was a guy that I was high on coming out of high school, because we saw what Jimbo's done with Jay Sternberger, dating ourselves. We saw what he did with was it Nicholas or O'Leary? What was his name?
Yeah, Nick O'Leary.
Every time you bring him up, it's checking with his grandkid. What is the tight end position going to be like a position of weakness, like where it's noticeable in the offense, or is it going to be one of the situations where you mentioned Stewart, some of the freshman receivers you mentioned, or you didn't mention, but we don't need to, A-Chain and Anaya Smith being just dominant forces on offense? Is that going to be a problem, or do you think it'll just be something that kind of develops?
I think it'll change over the course of the year, because once again in 2022, A&M brought in 3 of the top tight ends in the country. You had Jake Johnson, brother of Mac Johnson, who was the top. You also had Donovan Green, who was a top 100 guy himself. Well, maybe just outside the top 100. And then, believe it or not, A&M signed a 4-star tight end from Sweden. Who?
Sorry, what?
Yeah. He was a guy he went and did like the camp circuit last summer, summer of 2021, and just like out of nowhere was just like got like offered by like 10 different programs.
Right.
But so they have like tons of talent there, but it's all true freshmen. So outside of those guys, you're looking at Max Wright, who's like, he's a 4th or 5th year player who came in as a defensive end and then got converted to tight end. You've got a few other guys who have been there for a couple of years, but kind of no one that you're super excited about.
Right.
So it sounds like Max Wright at the moment is the starter. And that's something that I think a lot of A&M fans are very ho-hum about, just because he's not a flashy player. He's not gonna wow you with measurables. But
he's not from Sweden, so I mean, pretty uncultured. Who cares?
But so that really could be one where right now, you have these freshmen that have only been in the system a couple months, that they're not there yet, but maybe by mid-October, November, that changes, and kind of when their knowledge of what they're supposed to do actually matches up with their talent, they might.
Right.
But that does like kind of hit on another interesting point is just that in Jimbo's offense at A&M, like I think it's almost every year a tight end has been the leading receiver, and that's been either Sternberger or Jalen Weidermeyer. And I'll be interested to see how that changes. Because I think you don't have just that obvious talent there that is going to demand the ball. But also, you bring in hopefully more talented wide receiver core. And I don't know if you guys knew this. A&M actually shuffled their offensive assistants around beginning with fall.
I saw that.
Yeah. So James Coley, who actually coached wide receivers at Georgia, was coaching tight ends at A&M. He's now with the receivers. And Damian Craig is now with quarterbacks. And then the OC, Daryl Dickey, who used to be with quarterbacks, is now coaching tight ends. So they kind of did a little musical chairs there. And me, like just from the pure optimist standpoint, I want to say, well, the tight ends were so successful under James Coley. Now that he's working with receivers, maybe he'll be able to work his magic over on those guys.
Yeah.
But I do think that, and Jimbo and Dickey have both been vocal that like they want to be more vertical this year, and they've even gone as far to say is that like they have the guys that will allow them to be more vertical this year.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how much of that actually translate onto the field.
What's surprising too is like you brought it up, and it's plain as day to see now. Like if you had Weidermeyer and you had Sternberger, and those are your best like receiving tight ends, whoever has the most difficult last name to spell, and it's probably the kid from Sweden, is going to be your starter. Just bottom line.
Yeah. There's Wright, Johnson, Green, and then Orstrom, which has an H thrown in there somewhere.
Ooh.
Boom.
Yep.
So, we figured it out together. Tyler, what do you have?
I like it.
The win total is 8.5. Looking at the schedule, let's just say they're right at that. They're either at 8 or 9. What's one of the swing games you think is going to be kind of a toss up that worries you about preventing them from going over the 8.5?
I think it starts week 3 against Miami. That's everyone is in love with Miami right now. That was a game that a year ago we were looking at like, okay, like it's a name program and probably a pretty easy win. But they bring in Cristobal, they bring in a great staff, they're doing well in recruiting, and we'll see. I think that once again, that's the thing I hate about this time of year is that we're sitting here talking about like that could be a huge measuring stick game, and we're probably going to get to week 3, and if A&M wins, like especially if they win convincingly, I'm just going to be like through the roof excited. And then of course, that just means that Miami's going to go 7-5. And by the end of the year, that game's not going to mean anything.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's tough because Miami, they weren't like really good last year, and it's the same roster. I think they're kind of like A&M in the fact that I think if you look forward, Miami has a lot to be excited about, just like A&M does. But I think this year Miami brings back the same team they did last year, minus a couple of really good receivers that went in the NFL. I just don't know if that early in the season. They have a really good QB, obviously, but Jimbo's obviously 7-1 against Miami, and I loved every second of that when he was at Florida State.
I'm going to use that.
Yeah. All right. So outside of the Miami game, I mean, I feel like, and I will go ahead and say, Chris, I'm chalking up Bama as a loss this year. I feel like there's just too much working against us there. But outside of that, like I feel like the SEC West, I don't remember the last time that I just sit here and like looked at like the rest of the teams in the West and was like, I have no idea what anyone's going to be. Like LSU could be good, they could suck. Auburn is probably going to suck, but they could be good. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, like they could go either way. Like Arkansas, we think is going to be good, but they lost a lot from last year. So it's I've never been like less confident in like what that hierarchy of those teams is going to be. Yeah,
good point.
Well, so I mean, you kind of gave your answer to it, but I just how the tables have turned. I've said all offseason, I don't think that the Bama A&M game is just like a gimme for Bama. Despite Jimbo acting like, in my opinion, what would be an a-hole. I will say to myself this offseason. I understand all the other stuff that led up to it. But what I'll say is this: like you look at, and admittedly, this might just be because I'm still like seeing PTSD from last year when Zach Calzada beat Bama. But that being said, you look at what the weakness of last year's Bama team was, which was ACLs, literally, and then also the offensive line. Like ACLs for 2 games, the offensive line the entire season. The offensive line was horrible. It was one of the main factors. I feel like if you look at like where A&M separated themselves against Bama that day, not just with special teams and quarterback play, they were really good on the offensive line. There weren't a lot of pressures. I don't think they gave up any sacks. Will Anderson was contained. All of the talent that A&M is coming in is at a position that is not only one of the most important positions like in SEC football year in and year out, and games being one of the trenches, but also it is the biggest. I think it's the most significant position where they could have an upper hand because of how bad Bama's offensive line is. If that game gets to late in the fourth and they are tied, and somebody comes up and says, "Robert, listen, you guys can win this game, but you go 8-4 again." Yeah, and you might even be undefeated at that point. You taking that, or are you going like the rest of the season with like a close Bama loss, maybe, I don't know, and then seeing how the rest of the season plays out?
I will gladly take the Bama loss and take our chances the rest of the way. Because I think
okay, good.
And I'm so sick of the 8-4 jokes. I can't even tell you. And for A&M, I think it's just one of those things because like you mentioned 2020, that like as great as that season was, because it was a COVID season, I think a lot of people from the outside just kind of dismiss it as if like, well, it's like that doesn't really count. And so
not me and you, baby.
Yeah. The Bama fans are like our lone compadres there. But it's like, but if you can do something this year, if you can go 10-2, then all of a sudden you can say, look, it's like in the last 3 years, like, that 8-4 season's the outlier. It's not the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I think that's part of A&M fans are just desperate to try to get over that hump, try to show that we're headed in the right direction. And
if he goes 7-5, is he in trouble?
Losing to Bama, because I mean, there's no shame in losing to Bama, especially in Tuscaloosa, and when they're going to have, it's going to be a revenge game just based on last year, all the, Jimbo and Saban crap. It's like everyone's going to have that game circled. So I think A&M, they might have snuck up on Bama a little bit last year, just because A&M looked like a lame duck going into the game. But that's not going to happen this year for sure.
Right.
No, Chris, he's not going to be in trouble if they go 7-5 with those recruiting classes.
Well, but like, serious question, like, what is it going to like? What would it take for him to be like not on thin ice or on the hot seat? I understand all the stuff like in the positive momentum, but like if they go 6-6 or they go 7-5, and there's not a notable win on the schedule, what is the attitude of the fan base going into next year, you think?
I mean, pissed, like for sure. And, I feel like, we're at year 5, and especially with the roster he's put together, there's no excuses for not, being 9-3, 10-2, even better than that. Now granted, I was like, there's always context because I'll be the first to tell you, like, you can sit there and look at 8-4 from last year, and I'll tell you, well, it's like, I was telling people before the season started, I said it on here that like quarterback and offensive line were A&M's 2 question marks going into last year. That just also happened to be where they had the most injuries happen. And so, it's like, context matters. So not every win is created equal. Not every loss is created equal, and kind of, who actually played in the game and everything, all of that plays into it. But ultimately, all people will remember is what your record was. So,
yeah.
True.
Now, as far as like actually him being actually on the hot seat, like that buyout is so massive. Like after this season, he still has 9 guaranteed years. So it's like even if he goes 4-8, like I think you just, and that was I think part of just A&M's gamble when they lured him away. I think they just said, they're like, look, we're pushing all of our chips in the middle of the for Jimbo, and if it doesn't work out, like it literally is going to cost us like a decade before we get back from it. But that's the gamble they took.
What is the buyout?
I think it's like
the rest of his contract.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's guaranteed. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we fully guaranteed it when we hired him, and then then last summer, because of all the LSU, trying to him, like he got essentially 3 years added onto it.
Every year, Jimbo just flirts with
Every
LSU
year.
and gets raises. It's unbelievable. All right, so it sounds like let's get an official prediction here. The win total 8.5. You going over or under this year for A&M?
I'm going for sure over. I was like, and if I'm gonna predict a win and loss, I'm gonna say 10-2. And I've already touched on it a little bit here, but I think one of those losses coming to Bama, and then the other one, I kind of have no idea where it's coming from, but it's just like over the course of that schedule, I think there's like at least half a dozen games where you're saying like, okay, that team is at least good enough to trip us up, even if they're not they're not favored, but just the odds say at some point you're going to drop one of those, whether it's Florida, Ole Miss, LSU, name your team on that schedule. I would say the one team that is getting a lot of play this year is maybe a potential hot team that I just don't get is South Carolina.
Yeah.
And it's and I get it. I love Shane Beamer. He's awesome to listen to, but I feel like that team kind of overachieved last year, and that's with they 3 of their losses were by 25 points or more.
Right.
One of those,
which is close, but that's they were close.
Yeah, the A&M game last year, through 3 quarters, they had negative rushing yards.
Oh boy.
So hold on, we talked about this with somebody because we always forget that is a rivalry game. That's a trophy game, right? But there may not be a rivalry game, or especially over the past 2 seasons, a game that has been that one-sided, maybe in the last decade. I don't know, but as A&M and South Carolina, because the year before it was 41-3, and that's what caused the whole thing with all the boosters. But there was this openly, there was a screaming match at the games, if you don't fire Muschamp, y'all did all that. So pat on the back.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna mispronounce the stat, but when we played South Carolina in baseball this year, I think A&M's just blew the doors off of them.
Right.
In one of the games, where literally I think A&M scored 20 runs. And I tweeted out the stat. I said A&M baseball scored more today than South Carolina football did in the past 2 years against A&M.
Jesus.
Oh boy.
Wow. Well, I'm not going to talk about A&M baseball ever again after what I did in the SEC championship or SEC tournament when I made a joke about y'all not being able to buy a run when you were down 6-1 to Bama, and then came back and won 13-6. But yeah, I'm with you on the over, man. I think they go over as well. And we appreciate you coming on, man. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah. So I'm the managing editor over at goodbullhunting.com, which is Texas A&M's SB Nation's Texas A&M site. And you can also find me on Twitter. I'm at RCB05.
Fantastic follow on Twitter, by the way. That we were talking about before you came on here, the all gas, no brakes meme. Incredible. Incredible.
That was one of those where it was Friday evening, and my wife was asked me to come help make dinner, and I had to act like I was doing something really important,
right?
So I could finish my stupid Photoshop to own the horns.
It's good. It was worth it too. So
love it. All right, man. Thanks, Robert. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
All right. Bye-bye. All righty. 10-2. We'll see. Jimbo's always good for one random loss.
What, 8.5?
It is. It's 8.5. 10-2 would be a nice little season for Jimbo before that younger talent really starts to kick in. I'll be interested. I'll be interested to see what Evan Stewart does this year.
Yeah.
Well, before we head out, it's been a long pod. Don't forget 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Wanted to read a review we got last week. This says TV shows to podcast. 5 stars, obviously. I used to wait all week for certain shows to come out on TV. Since being a full-time college student the last few years at South Alabama, podcasts are all I look forward to now. Love the show from the very beginning. Y'all two are funny and make the Friday drive back home and the Monday morning drive to campus worth it after classes start next week. So I'll be tuning into more of the live shows on YouTube. Hopefully you're in the chat tonight. You two are awesome. If I haven't said that enough, can't wait for the season. War Damn Eagle.
Ooh, look at us making friends.
Auburn fan. So so that's Ben C 3428 via Apple Podcast. So Ben, if you're in the chat, appreciate it, brother.
For real, man, we do appreciate that.
And this has been a good episode. I think we previewed some pretty good teams here. And anything else before we let everybody go?
No, man, it's just so crazy that next week is game week.
And the live event.
So make sure we'll be pumping that out as well. But you know, I think we got a couple more teams to go. We got Bama, we got Florida, Tennessee. I'm sure I'm missing some that we're probably not going to end up doing, or like we're not going to do Missouri.
Ole Miss,
Vandy,
we'll do Ole Miss as well.
Yeah, but let us know if there's anything you want us to also preview going into the year. We'll give our picks and all that kind of stuff next week, and then it'll be game week, like we said, man. I haven't even looked at the week 0 lines, but there's I'm sure we'll be paying close attention. So
not a ton of great games, but I'll be watching all of them, I'm sure.
For sure.
All right, Chris. Well, for Chris, I'm Tyler. Thanks for listening to another episode of the College Football Uncensored podcast. We will see you later this week for some more previews.
Thanks, y'all.
Peace.